Hey everyone, Israel is currently in a war against the terror organization Hamas, and we know how hard it can be to keep up with all the news. So if you haven't had the time to stay on top of the latest developments out of Israel, we're here for you. I'm Ladar Gavelazi, and this is ILTV's Weekly Review.
Welcome back to ILTV News, and happy Passover to all our viewers. We open with the latest on the security situation today as a terror attack took place near Hebron in a car ramming attack that injured one police officer. The suspect fled to the nearby village of Dura. And in Gaza, the IDF has expanded operations and has now surrounded Rafah, cut off the southernmost city and about 20% of the population from the rest of the enclave. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
The city of Rafah and 20% of the Gaza population is now surrounded by forces from the 36th Division and the Gaza Division operating in the Philadelphia corridor along the Egypt-Gaza border. The Golani Brigade entered from the border in the southeast. The announcement came as the army grabbed complete control of the Morag corridor, cutting off Rafah from Khan Yunis. The IDF's expanded buffer will stretch from the Egyptian border to the outskirts of Khan Yunis. Elsewhere, the border from Gaza has been expanded from several hundred meters to about 2 kilometers in most areas. Over the past weeks, during the operations in the Morag corridor area, the IDF eliminated dozens of terror operatives and destroyed Hamas infrastructure, including tunnels. 2 soldiers were wounded during the operations and expanded control of the area. Engineering forces are constructing a road along the Morag corridor. New evacuation orders were given to Gazan civilians after 3 rockets were fired toward Israel. The Air Force struck dozens of targets across Gaza over the holiday weekend, targeting cells of operatives, buildings used by terror groups, and other infrastructure. The Air Force struck inside the Al-Ahli hospital that was used by Hamas to plan and execute terror attacks. Prior to the strikes, the IDF provided early warning in the area and used precision weapons to avoid civilian casualties. Defense Minister Katz called on Palestinian civilians to remove Hamas and release all of the hostages before the IDF further expands operations in the Strip. Katz said intensive IDF activity will soon expand to additional places in Gaza, and civilians would be forced to evacuate the combat zones. Katz said that Hamas is unable to protect the residents of the territory. Its leaders are hiding in tunnels, and their families are in luxury hotels abroad, with billions in their bank accounts while using the Gazan population as hostages. It's time to stand up and remove Hamas and release all of Israeli hostages. This is the only way to end the war, Katz said. And those interested would be able to voluntarily move to other countries around the world, in accordance with the vision of U.S. President Donald Trump, which Israel is working to carry out.
And now joining us to discuss Israel's position on the threat of a nuclear Iran is Brigadier General Relik Shafir, who took part in the daring Israeli Air Force strike on the Iraqi nuclear reactor in Operation Opera back in 1981. Brigadier General Shafir, thank you for joining us today. Just to start, what's your initial response to these talks that we saw between the United States and Iran over the weekend?
I think it's a positive note. And let's hope that if there is an agreement, it will curtail Iran's capability of advancing towards a nuclear weapon. And if not, then the only option would be a military one.
Now, if it does come to striking these nuclear sites in Iran, can you tell us a little bit about what that strike might look like? Is this something that Israel can do alone? And do you estimate the strikes would be limited to nuclear sites or possibly also key IRGC sites as well?
Nothing is off the table. Of course, Israel can strike alone, as had been shown in April. And the question is, what will be the outcome? Israel can hit the nuclear plan, which is placed in about 33 sites. Some of them are, the most important ones are heavily guarded by a lot of rock and cement. And let me just explain, for the sake of our viewers, the heaviest weapon that the U.S. bombers, the B-2, can carry is a 25,000 pound bunker buster, and the heaviest load that our F-15s can carry are about 3,000 pounds. So the difference is foursome. And so you can understand that Israel can hurt Iran, but it cannot destroy the nuclear program. For this, you need a strategic air command, as the United States have. About hitting the targets, of course, not just in nuclear sites, but other sites might be in the making, either IRGC or others, like their ability to ship oil out of Iran, which are vulnerable targets. But that remains to be seen as we make decisions with the Americans.
Now, I know that many Iranians are actually wondering what's taking Israel so long, and they view such a strike, in some cases, as a lifeline for them against a very unpopular regime. Does Israel have a long-term strategy on Iran based on what you know and the information that you have?
Israel has a capability and plans, obviously, that have been, the Israeli Air Force has been training for many, many years for that eventuality. But I doubt whether this will take place without the U.S. support and permission, so to speak. And that remains to be seen with President Trump keeping Israel as a proxy for attacking Iran, but giving a chance to the talks at present.
Now, finally, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your experience and how does the challenge of a nuclear Iran today compare with the threat from Iraq in 1981? Is this operation more complex or dangerous?
No, I wouldn't say that, because today the Air Force can deliver weapons from a distance, from afar. And Israel has, I would say, complete superiority with the U.S. Air Force supporting it all the way to Iran, because Iran has virtually no Air Force, and their high-end anti-air missiles have been hit in 2024 by us. So the question of danger is difficult to judge, but at the time, 1981, we had to hit the targets in close proximity from direct bombing from a couple of thousand feet. And the area was surrounded with missiles. It's a flat area, or it was a flat area. And at least the supposition was that 2 of the 8 airplanes would be shot down. Happily, that was not the case. Happily, certainly for me and my buddy Ilan Ramon, who were last in the line, about 12 seconds behind the leader.
Now, we know that after the nuclear reactor in Iraq was destroyed, there was some pushback in the international media, while at the same time behind closed doors they were saying, thank God that this happened and that Israel did this. What do you expect the response would be if Israel is indeed forced to act against the Islamic regime?
The word forced to act, I think, is misplaced. Wants to act is different. And I think the world will understand the reasons it's been going for such a long time that the Iranians have been clearly cheating on the inspectors. And both the Europeans are more worried than the Americans, because the missiles that Iran is planning or wants to use can reach European capitals as well. So I think the world is actually looking for relief from the threat. But that remains to be seen, because the international scenario is quite difficult, because remember that, for instance, the Chinese, who are supporting Iran, have a quest for attacking Taiwan. And that curtails somewhat the ability of the United States, or the will of the United States, to use direct attack, but they would rather use Israel as a proxy.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time, but I want to thank you for joining us today on the broadcast, and of course, wish you a happy Passover to you and your family. Brigadier General Relik Shafir, thank you. This Saturday, the second round of nuclear talks between the U.S. and Iran is set to take place in Muscat. But there's already been significant confusion over U.S. demands due to contradictory statements of U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff. Let's take a closer look.
After a controversial interview with U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff, in which he stated that the U.S. seeks to limit Iran's uranium enrichment to 3.67%, 70% of the enrichment level needed for a bomb, the U.S. administration appears to be backtracking. Witkoff is now claiming the policy is complete elimination of uranium enrichment and weaponization programs, contradicting his earlier statements about accepting 3.67% enrichment, the level set by the 2015 nuclear agreement. Critics argue that the proposed deal could allow Iran to maintain a rapid breakout capability, enabling it to develop a nuclear weapon in a short time frame. They also contend that the regime is using negotiations to buy time until President Trump leaves office without making meaningful concessions. While Witkoff has emphasized the need for full access for international inspectors, the current proposals do not address Iran's funding of terrorist activities through its regional proxies. This omission has raised concerns amongst observers who believe that any comprehensive agreement should also curb Iran's destabilizing actions in the Middle East. The U.S. position remains unclear due to Witkoff's conflicting statements. As negotiations continue this weekend in Oman, the international community watches closely to see whether a consistent and effective strategy will emerge.
As Passover began in Israel on Saturday night, Hamas released a propaganda video of the only American believed to be alive in captivity. The video showed 21-year-old Idan Alexander in distress and an emotional state during the video as he pleaded for his release. ILTV's Shosh Bedrosian is in Hostage Square now with the latest. Shosh, what can you tell us about this video?
Emily, this is the second time Hamas released a propaganda video of American citizen Idan Alexander since he's been in Hamas captivity. Now, the timing of this video was extremely painful. It was the exact same time that Passover was beginning here in Israel, and people were starting to gather at their tables for the Seder that evening. Now, the 21-year-old from Tenafly, New Jersey, said in the video he should be home with his friends and family, and he came to Israel as a lone soldier. As the IDF continues their ground offensive inside of the Gaza Strip in what they say will lead to the defeat of Hamas, the terror group is still producing propaganda videos below the surface. The same hour as the start of Passover in Israel, Hamas released a propaganda video of American-Israeli Idan Alexander in what appears to be in a tunnel. The 21-year-old was emotional and in clear distress as he spoke to the camera, begging for him to be released in the 3-minute undated video. Alexander stated he was held in Gaza for 551 days, which indicates the video was taken recently. The use of Alexander in the video holds significant weight, as the American government has been working to get him released earlier than anticipated in a deal, despite the fact that he is an Israeli soldier. The 21-year-old is the only American still believed to be alive in the Gaza Strip, although the bodies of several other Americans are being held captive by the terror group. Alexander's family approved the release of the video and said in a statement, quote, "Our son Idan's love for Israel led him to leave his comfortable life in New Jersey and join the IDF. On October 7th, he stood his ground alone at his military post, trying to protect nearby communities from Hamas terrorists." The statement went on to say Alexander remains alone in the tunnels and is calling on President Trump to get him released, saying, quote, "Our hope and trust rests with you now." The statement says, "We implore you to use your leadership and negotiation skills to secure a deal that will bring all 59 hostages back to their families." Egyptian mediators are now pushing a proposal that would release 8 living hostages instead of 11, which was part of Israel's most recent proposal in exchange for restoring the ceasefire, in which Hamas said they would release 5 hostages instead. The new push by Egypt is in response to both sides refusing to compromise further, according to reports. Israeli media reports say Netanyahu agreed to soften demands in the deal after meeting with Trump last week. Israel said they submitted their response to this new proposal to Egyptian mediators, and now they're waiting for Hamas's response. Emily?
All right, thank you, Shosh, for that update. And joining us now to discuss the nuclear talks and recent events, including the tragic execution of her father, kidnapped and tortured Iranian freedom fighter Jamshid Sharmad, is his daughter, a geopolitical expert herself, Ghazaleh Sharmad. Ghazaleh, welcome. I want to start by asking about your father and the concerning trend of hostage-taking, whether by the regime or by Hamas in Gaza. Could you break down for our viewers how your father's body was returned to Germany?
Thank you, Emily, and thank you for standing with us for so long. We've discussed so much about the hostages in Gaza and the hostage business of the Islamic regime that has been going on for 45 years. You were with us in Berlin this Friday when we received the dead body of my father, who was kidnapped to Iran, tortured for 5 years, executed last October, and we received his body in pieces. So when we saw my father mutilated in such a way, I can't put in words what we saw there, because it is just beyond words. But me and my brother couldn't recognize my father. We saw his mouth open with only 2 teeth still in his mouth. His tongue was cut out. His heart was cut out. His voice box, his larynx were cut out. So many organs of his body were removed, and that it just shows you the amount of barbarism that you see from this regime. This is not just a normal war or normal anything. This is from times of barbaric times where you would not just kill a person, but be such a beast and monster that you don't even return the dead corpse in one piece, but take out organs. So this is to understand who we're dealing with and who we have to get rid of, and it explains the pure evil that we're facing.
Now, you've been very outspoken about the current nuclear talks and have even called to halt the current negotiations between the U.S. and the Islamic regime. Can you explain why these talks actually serve the interests of the regime?
Beyond being absolutely perverted, that our administration, because my father is a U.S. national and a German national, that they're sitting right now in Oman, the very city where my father was kidnapped through and taken to Iran. And they're sitting there on that day that we receive a mutilated body, talking to the kidnappers and torturers and mutilators of my father. It's just perverted. But in general, before that, we are here in this situation because of the nuclear talks and the nuclear agreement in 2015. That was not created to stop a regime from having nuclear ambitions. It was not made for that, but it set free at least $150 billion to the Islamic regime. So the 10 years that have passed, this is the aftermath of dealing with the regime. This is the money that they used to create terror proxies that were so strong to do October 7th, to do what they did to my father. They could not have done that, what they're doing in the Middle East and beyond, without these kind of negotiations. So yes, as a person, as a family, as a freedom fighter, I'm absolutely against talking to terrorists. That should never happen unless you're trying to, what Israel is trying to right now, to save lives and release hostages, but not before that. And this is just where it begins.
Now, in the aftermath of the execution of your father, as well as, of course, the start of these nuclear talks, what do you hope to see happen, both from the European side and from the United States?
I understand that I don't have the power or authority to stop negotiations as they're taking place. I wish I did. But for the very least, the Trump administration, President Trump, should halt the negotiations until an investigation is done. Why is this important? For years, we have tried to go through the UN and international bodies to hold criminals like the Islamic regime accountable. And we can't do that because we have China and Russia and everybody in the UN interfering with that. Assad was not held accountable in Syria. Hamas was not held accountable. The Islamic regime is not held accountable. So what we have right now is a unique opportunity from our pain. My father is German American. That means we have 2 courts based on the autopsy reports that can file right now, that have a duty to file investigations against the Islamic regime. All of these people who are involved in the kidnapping plot, in the everything that they did to my father up until the mutilation in return has to be investigated. That means arrest warrants from Germany and from America has to go out, and we hope that President Trump, Kash Patel, will take up this case and make it a priority right now. That is the bare minimum what we can do, but we can start with that right now.
Now, finally, I know you've been a staunch advocate for hostage families, you yourself, of course, tragically being one. I'm wondering if you have a final message for the Israeli hostage families, in addition to the Iranian community, which has faced this same terrorism for 45 years.
For the last 5 years, I've done nothing more than talking to hostage families from all over the globe. It is not just our problem. We have French families, Swedish families, Americans, Australians, everybody who's been taken hostage and tortured in silence. But I think our closest people that can really understand what the Iranian people are going through are the Israeli people, because the Islamic regime and its jihadists don't just randomly take us hostage. It is out of their hate for their people. So they hate Iranians. They are not the Iranian regime. They're the Islamic regime that wants to kill Iranians, that wants to destroy our identity, that wants to kill Jews, that wants to kill Israel, that wants to destroy the identity. So when I see the hostage families from Gaza, the Israelis, it is a completely different connection, because they're going through the same pain that not only my family has gone through by receiving our loved ones in such a state, but the Iranian people in Iran who are fighting this regime are hostages. They're held hostage by the Islamic regime for 45 years. They're mutilated, they're killed, they're kidnapped. All of this is happening, but in silence, because the media is not showing it. So to those families, you are not alone. You have a nation behind you. The nation of Iran is not the Islamic regime. We are in this together. We will fight with you together until we are both free and we can both sing and dance again and be united as we were for millennia.
All right, we're unfortunately out of time, but I want to thank you, Ghazaleh, for joining us today.
Thank you.
In a bold move to combat campus anti-Semitism, President Donald Trump has frozen over $2.2 billion in federal funding to Harvard University and threatened to revoke its tax-exempt status. This action follows Harvard's refusal to implement administration demands aimed at addressing anti-Semitism on campus. The administration's demands included audits of academic programs, reforms to admissions and hiring practices to ensure merit-based selection, and measures to protect Jewish students from discrimination. Harvard President Alan Garber rejected the demand, citing concerns over academic freedom and institutional autonomy. President Trump defended the funding freeze, stating that taxpayer dollars should not support institutions that fail to uphold civil rights laws and combat anti-Semitism. Other universities have also faced funding cuts over similar issues. Columbia University had $400 million in federal grants and contracts canceled due to the alleged failure to protect Jewish students from anti-Semitic harassment on campus. Cornell University saw a freeze of $1 billion, Northwestern University $790 million, and Brown University $510 million. Princeton University and the University of Pennsylvania have also faced funding cuts. The administration has also taken action against students involved in pro-Hamas activism, with over 800 students and more than 120 colleges have had their visas revoked or legal status terminated in recent weeks. These actions are part of a broader effort to address terror support on campus. As the situation develops, the administration remains firm in its position that compliance with federal civil rights obligations is non-negotiable for recipients of government funding.
For more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at ILTV.tv or download the ILTV Plus app. That's it for ILTV's weekly review. Stay safe and see you next week.